I read the transcripts from day one of Trump's criminal trial in New York so that you don't have to. So the first quarter or more of the day is very like regular court stuff. The judge talks to the jury. He's like, here's what's going to happen. First, we're going to have opening statements. The prosecution has to give one. They're going to give one. The defense doesn't have to give one, but they're definitely going to give one. Then you're going to hear evidence. Things that witnesses say, that's evidence. Things that lawyers say, not evidence. The indictment, not evidence. Things that the witnesses say, evidence. Pictures of things, evidence. We're going to label that. That's going to be labeled evidence. He explains the labeling system, but I don't think you guys need to hear about it. Then he says there's going to be closing statements, and you guys are going to deliberate. And then he talks a lot about how the burden of proof is going to be on the prosecution. They have to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that the defendant, Donald Trump, is guilty. Okay, he talks also a lot about like implicit bias and how like we all have it and we need to not judge anybody by like their race or their religion or their gender or the fact that they may or may not have started an insurrection. He doesn't say that, but then he's like, don't watch the news. Don't talk to anybody about what you're doing here. We're not going to sequester you, but try and live a sequestered life. Then we get to the opening statements. The prosecution, they go first. They lay out their case against Donald Trump. They're like, here's what happened. In the months leading up to the election, Donald Trump, Michael Cohen, and David Pecker. So David Pecker is the head of American Media, which owns the National Enquirer and like a bunch of other tabloids and news sources. Michael Cohen, famously an ex-Trump lawyer / lackey. It's early 2016, I think. It's before the election. They all have a meeting. They decide on a 3-pronged strategy to help get Donald Trump elected. First, they're going to run positive coverage of Trump. Second, they're going to run negative coverage of Trump's opponents. They even specifically bring up the Ted Cruz like affair hit pieces that they ran. And then the third arm is that David Pecker, in his role as a media mogul, is going to be the eyes and ears of the Trump campaign, and he's going to like look out for any sketchy Donald Trump stories that come his way. And what's he going to do? If he sees them, he's going to catch them and kill them. If you've had the misfortune of having the news on at all in the last 3 days, I'm sure you've heard the term catch and kill. And essentially that means they're going to buy up stories and sit on them, just stop them from getting out to the public. And then the prosecution accuses this little trio of doing this 3 times leading up to the election. First, we have a doorman who was paid $30,000 for his uncorroborated story about a potential child born out of wedlock to Donald Trump. Next, we have Karen McDougal, an ex-Playboy playmate who alleges, I want to say like a years-long affair with Mr. Trump. American Media buys her limited life rights, I think is what it's called, for $150,000. Ultimately, David Pecker and AMI end up eating the cost of that payoff because they decide that the whole plan to transfer the cost to Trump starts to get like a little too publicly illegal. Next is the infamous Stormy Daniels, who decides that maybe she should come forward after the Access Hollywood leak, and she's paid $130,000 for her story. Now, no one can decide who's going to pay the $130,000. Obviously, Donald Trump can't do it. How's he going to explain that? David Pecker doesn't want to do it. He didn't get paid back the $150,000 that he put out on the last catch and kill deal. That's how we end up with Michael Cohen paying Stormy Daniels $130,000 ahead of the 2016 election. We also get a little like preview moment. We hear that there's a text from Keith Davidson, who was the lawyer for both Stormy Daniels and Karen McDougal on the night of the election, to, I'm going to forget his name, but a guy at American Media saying, "What have we done?" Then we learned that Donald Trump has to pay back the $130,000 that Michael Cohen paid to Stormy Daniels, but he can't just make it look like a regular reimbursement payment, because what is he reimbursing Michael Cohen for? It can't be for hush money. So they work out what that figure would be if it was like a salaried number that you then took taxes off and got to the reimbursement. It's a little north of $400,000. And that's how we get Michael Cohen billing the Trump organization for, I'm going to say 11 rounds of $35,000 in legal fees. Then the prosecution is like, look, we get it. We know that Michael Cohen is a sketchy guy. We know that he's a convicted criminal. We understand all of these things. This doesn't mean that he isn't a reformed man who's going to come stand in front of you and tell the truth. Also, we've got a lot of other stuff. We're going to back up his truth. And now it's time for the defense's opening statement. They start off by reminding the jury, much as the judge did 45 pages or minutes or whatever ago, that Donald Trump, as a defendant, has showed up shrouded in a cape of innocence. In fact, he's just a regular family guy. Is any of his family present in the courtroom to back him up? No, but he is. He's a family man. The defense is like, yeah, Michael Cohen is a sketchy guy. So is Stormy Daniels. She's a sketchy guy as well. And they're both trying to make money off of this situation, which, that's crazy. It's not like Donald Trump would ever try and monetize the situation. It's not like he sends campaign letters begging for contributions to his legal defense. I mean, re-election fund, and it's not like he sells gold sneakers. But he's like, Donald Trump is a busy guy. So he signed some checks for Michael Cohen. He was always signing checks for Michael Cohen. Michael Cohen worked for him for years. He signs checks all the time. Also, he's a super prudent businessman who would never overspend. He's super prudent, but he's not exactly sure what checks he's signing. Those things both, they coexist. He also says there's nothing wrong with trying to influence an election. That's called democracy, which feels a little dystopic, but is technically accurate in a sense. And they go on a little break, and up next is David Pecker's testimony, which it's ongoing. Do you guys want a video on that when it wraps up? Let me know if you want a video on that.